I'm going to show something. I've got a simple setup. I'm just trying to explain so people can understand one very, very basic thing about the inverter. Here is a meter here, which is basically like your export meter. And you can see the export meter here is reading 189 watts, it's exporting power. But here, we've got another meter, which is my grid meter, and you can see there's very little power. It's actually importing power at the moment. So why is my inverter meter, my generation meter showing an export, yet my other meter showing an import? I've got a load here, so if I increase the load, I've increased the load. Look at my export meter. My export meter is increased here, but look at my import meter, it's staying the same. So I've got a differential between the two meters. So export meter is one, but my electricity meter is different. It's because the load here, the load is in the middle. This power that's taking is in the middle between the two meters. My CT coil is here. So my CT coil is measuring measuring the power from the meter, but it's being consumed before the CT coil. So we're consuming it before the CT coil. So the point is, I can try to explain it on here. I think we were drawing it on the thing. You've got 2 meters and you've got the part in the middle. I wonder how the best way to explain it, very simple terms, because you're actually consuming the electricity, and so therefore you're always going to get a differential between your export meter and your electricity meter will always be different. It's the power you consume. Now, if I look at one little thing here, if I look at the reading here, which is 375 watts, and I look here, how many bulbs have how much loading have I got here?
We've got 400 watt.
Right, 400 watts. So I've got 400 watts here, and be aware the inverter itself uses about 50 watts. And what's the power on here? 78 watts. Can you see it? So, right, so simple mathematics. 78, okay, this is what's going in, minus 400, minus 50, so plus 50, which is the consumption of the inverter. So 400 minus 78 is what, 330, plus 50, 372, 370, correct? What's the power on here? 377, absolutely spot on. It's just, you have to take into account your load. So you can't say, oh, my electricity meter is reading one thing and my generation meter is another thing and the app is another thing. Let's look at the app itself. The app will also show slightly different. So if I can see on the app here, in fact, the app is showing the export, in fact, it's showing 381 watts. So the app is actually reading, is similar. Can you get it on the screen?
No, it's just the reflection.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Killing
okay.
this.
So it's 380 watts, but my power meter is different. So sorry, can't really see it on the screen. I'm just trying to demonstrate something very simple. 2 meters, export meter, electricity meter will be different because the load is in the middle. Because it is a bi-directional inverter and the load, it doesn't work. The power doesn't go into the inverter and out through the other connection. Because look here, you see on the inverter, we use one connection, a grid connection. There's just one wire, one connection. The same connection is both an in and an out. It's an in and out connection. So having the one connection, if I run the power into the grid and out through the load, there's a whole different thing. Everything will be very, very different. But in this particular circumstances, because the inverter is a bi-directional inverter, and when I can take off the load, if it's charging the battery or discharging the battery, depending on the condition, will depend. So the 2 meters are actually not really giving me true figures. The best figures really look at the app and it'll give you a truer figure of your generation. But honestly, trying to look at the two, sometimes when you're on very, very low power, it becomes a little bit, you can get sort of tolerances on very low power. But generally it's really good. And in fact, I'm running it here, 400 watts, and it's absolutely working perfect. If I drop the rating down a little bit, we see here now the output, the export is only 177, but my other meter is still reading 78. So I'm still pulling in power. So I'm pulling in power and exporting at the same time, because the power is basically, there is an amount of energy that the inverter uses. So the power coming in is the energy which is using. It's supplying my load, which is basically classed as my non-essential load, and it's also exporting through my export meter if I've got an export meter. The thing is, if I was to connect on the load side, it would be different. The load side is what you use for essential loads, so it would give you a whole different thing. So something to bear in mind. We get so many people and so many questions. People say, oh, we've got a problem, the inverter's faulty, whatever. It's not. It's just understanding how the system works. I'll try and explain more. Maybe Ronald, you can do a drawing and explain it and do some mathematics, put it up on the posts. So
Yes.
Ronald is filming it. So let's take that. Thanks for following us.